It was exactly 3:04 a.m. when the beam of a flashlight cut across the surface of the lake, followed by the flashing red and blue of a police cruiser pulling into the gravel road behind me. I was lying in my hammock under the stars, half asleep, a soft breeze from the lake brushing against my face, when I heard the sharp, commanding voice, "Sir. Put your hands where I can see them." For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I blinked and sat up slowly, my heart thudding in my chest. The hammock swayed slightly beneath me. My eyes adjusted just in time to see two officers approaching, one with a hand near his holster, the other scanning the area like I was some kind of criminal hiding out. Behind them, standing like a villain out of a bad movie, arms crossed and lips twisted in disgust, was her, Karen. The self-declared queen of the lake. The HOA president. And my personal headache for the past 4 months. She looked so proud of herself, like she'd finally caught the bad guy. The bad guy, in this case, was me, wearing old jeans, a hoodie, and holding a thermos of coffee in my lap. Real dangerous. The cops didn't come in hot, but they weren't relaxed either. "We got a report of a trespasser," one of them said. "Mind telling us what you're doing here this late?" I rubbed my eyes, trying to stay calm. "I'm doing what people do at a lake," I replied. "Relaxing. Looking at the stars. And trying to get some peace." "Do you live around here?" "Yep." "Can we see some ID?" "Sure thing," I said, reaching slowly for my wallet. I handed it over and added, "My name's Eli. I live just down the road. And this, right here, is my family's property." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You own this section of the lake?" "Not just this section," I said, pointing behind me, toward the trees. "My family owns this entire eastern shoreline. Bought it over 40 years ago. Been coming here since I was 5. The other cop was holding my ID under the flashlight, squinting at it. Karen suddenly stepped forward like she couldn't help herself. "He's lying," she snapped. "This is private HOA property. He's trespassing and refusing to leave. I told him multiple times. He's harassing residents and ignoring quiet hours." One of the officers held up a hand to quiet her down. "Ma'am, we're talking to him right now." I looked at her and then at them. I don't know what her deal is, but she's been trying to push me off this land for weeks. Putting up fake signs. Tearing down my fishing gear. Leaving nasty notes on my car. All because she thinks the HOA controls everything they see. But my land was here long before her HOA ever existed. I reached into the glove box of my truck, parked just a few feet away, and pulled out the manila folder I always keep there. Inside were the property records, maps, everything with the county stamp. I handed them to the officer, who began flipping through them. Slowly, his face changed. A little surprise. A little understanding. Karen's face, meanwhile, was getting redder by the second. The other officer leaned in to look too. "These documents check out," he said. "This is all your land?" "Every square inch," I said. Karen almost shouted. "That can't be. You don't look like someone who owns lakefront." That one stung. I stared at her, silent for a beat. The officer turned and said, "Ma'am, that's not how property ownership works." She wasn't done. "He's aggressive. He makes people uncomfortable. And he's violating noise rules." I raised my eyebrow. "Noise? I'm alone out here. No music. No fire. Just me and the stars." The cops looked around. One of them turned off his flashlight. "Honestly, ma'am, it looks like he's just sitting here." Karen looked stunned, like her brain couldn't process the idea that someone she didn't like might actually be doing nothing wrong. Finally, the lead officer handed me back my ID and documents. "Sorry for the disturbance, sir. You're free to stay here. You're not breaking any laws. I nodded. Thanks. I figured as much. They turned to leave. Karen opened her mouth like she was about to throw another fit, but the younger officer gently said, "Ma'am, unless you have a real emergency, please don't misuse 911. This could have been handled differently." That shut her up. At least for the moment. After they left, I sat back down in my hammock, heart still pounding a little. The stars were still above me, and the lake still whispered quietly at the shore. But something had changed. Karen had made it clear, this wasn't over for her. She didn't like losing. And I had just made her look like a fool in front of law enforcement. I sipped from my coffee, staring at the lake. This wasn't just about peace and quiet anymore. This was about standing your ground, even when someone tries to rewrite the rules on land that doesn't belong to them. I had a feeling the real fight was just beginning. I thought that after the cops realized Karen had no legal ground to stand on, things would finally calm down. Maybe she'd feel embarrassed and let it go. Maybe I could go back to enjoying the lake without drama. But no. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat, especially not from someone she had already decided didn't belong in her perfect little HOA-run world. 2 days after the 3 a.m. police incident, I received something unexpected in the mail. A court summons. Karen had filed an official complaint against me. According to the paperwork, she was accusing me of violating community quiet hours, trespassing, and making threatening gestures toward her. She even attached some grainy cell phone photos of me sitting by the lake, as if peacefully minding my business was some kind of felony. I shook my head and let out a laugh. This was outrageous. But one thing about me, I don't let people bully me. Especially not on my own property. So, instead of ignoring it or backing down, I decided to fight back the right way, by law. I called my cousin Riley, who's a real estate attorney, and told him the whole story. He listened patiently and then just said, "Oh, she messed with the wrong guy." Within 2 days, we had compiled a thick folder of documentation, aerial maps, property lines, tax receipts, witness statements, even a letter from the original developer of the land confirming our family's ownership before the HOA was ever created. But what really lit a fire in me was something Riley said over lunch. You know, people like her depend on others being too tired or too polite to push back. You're not just standing up for yourself, man, you're standing up for everyone she's ever intimidated. He was right. The day of the court hearing came faster than I expected. I pulled up to the county courthouse wearing a simple button-up shirt and clean jeans. I didn't need to impress anyone, I just needed the truth on my side. But when Karen arrived, it was like watching a full parade. She stepped out of her shiny white Lexus wearing a bright pink pantsuit, hair curled tight, and a smug look that could curdle milk. She had a stack of papers in her arms like she was about to present a TED Talk, and trailing behind her was a man in a blazer, probably her HOA's lawyer. She spotted me and gave me this fake little smile. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said sweetly. "Most people just pay the fine and move on." I smiled right back. Yeah, well, I'm not most people. Inside the courtroom, we sat opposite each other at 2 wooden tables. The judge, an older man with glasses and a calm face, looked over the file before starting. He turned to Karen first. "Ma'am, you're the plaintiff. Please explain your complaint." Karen stood up confidently, like this was her moment. "Your Honor, I represent the Lakeside Serenity Homeowners Association. We have rules, community standards, and quiet hours that everyone is expected to follow. Mr. Eli here has repeatedly violated those standards. He's not only camping on land that doesn't fall under HOA jurisdiction, but he has also been aggressive, refused to comply with our requests, and disturbed residents with loud activity at inappropriate hours." She pulled out a sheet of paper. "Here are photos of him on the lake at night. I even had to call the police at 3 a.m. because he wouldn't leave. The judge took the papers, glanced over them, and then turned to me. "Mr. Eli, your response." I stood up slowly and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My family has owned that piece of property for over 4 decades. It's private land, and it sits entirely outside the boundaries of the Lakeside Serenity HOA. I'm not a member, nor am I obligated to follow their rules. I've never caused harm to anyone. I was sitting in a hammock by the water when police arrived. Because she called 911 at 3 in the morning. Then I handed the judge our documents, deeds, maps, tax statements, and legal confirmation of the land's independence from the HOA. He took a few minutes to go through everything. The room was silent, except for Karen shifting nervously in her seat. The judge then asked me a few follow-up questions about how long we'd owned the land, and whether I had any legal obligation to the HOA. "No, sir," I replied. "We were here long before they were." Then came the moment I'll never forget. The judge leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and looked straight at Karen. "Ma'am, I've reviewed the property records. Mr. Eli's land is not under your HOA's jurisdiction. He is not bound to your rules. In fact, your complaint appears to be based on an assumption of authority where there is none." Karen's face went pale. I saw her lips twitch, but no words came out. The judge continued, "Furthermore, calling emergency services on a lawful property owner without cause is an abuse of public resources. If this happens again, you may be subject to penalties." Then he turned to me and said, "Sir, you are well within your rights. Case dismissed." That one word, "sir," cut through the silence like a bell. Karen didn't even look at me as she left the courtroom. She walked stiffly, her heels clacking too loud, like every step was filled with anger and disbelief. Meanwhile, I stood outside the courthouse with a grin I couldn't hide. I didn't just win, I had shut down a bully using nothing but facts, patience, and calm resolve. Karen didn't show her face around the lake for a few days after the court hearing. Honestly, I thought she might disappear completely, at least for the rest of the season. But people like her don't go down that easily. They don't admit they were wrong, they just look for new angles to twist the story. And sure enough, less than a week after the judge dismissed her case, I heard from one of the other lakefront owners that Karen was going around telling people I had pulled strings in court. According to her version, the judge was misinformed, the legal documents were outdated, and I had somehow tricked the system. It was ridiculous, but also kind of sad. Because even when the law is on your side, there will always be people who try to rewrite reality to fit their version of control. But something changed after that hearing, not just in Karen, but in the entire dynamic of the lake. Word got out fast. The small community around Lakeside Serenity HOA had been whispering about Karen's power plays for a while, but no one had stood up to her in court. Most people either didn't want the trouble or didn't have the time or resources to fight back. But now? Now they had a blueprint. A couple of folks started approaching me when I was down at the water. A guy named Thomas, who owned a cabin near the old boat dock, said, "Hey man, I saw what you did in court. That took guts. She's been threatening me for months about the height of my fence." Another woman, Maria, who lived across the cove, told me, she once fined me for hanging laundry outside. Said it ruined the HOA's image. But she has flamingos on her lawn. People started opening up, quietly at first, and then more freely. They were tired of the HOA's nitpicking rules and Karen's iron grip on every minor decision. The HOA board, it turned out, wasn't much more than a group of her friends who nodded whenever she spoke. But seeing someone stand their ground, on legal terms, seemed to wake people up. But here's the real kicker. About 2 weeks after the case was thrown out, I got a letter from the HOA itself. It wasn't a threat this time. It was an official notice, signed by Karen's name along with the HOA's legal advisor. The letter basically said, after review of community concerns and boundary clarifications, the Lakeside Serenity HOA recognizes that Mr. Eli and his property are not under HOA jurisdiction. We regret any confusion caused. It was almost an apology, but not quite. No, we're sorry. No, we were wrong. Just, we regret the confusion. Still, I framed it. But that wasn't the end. You see, I wasn't just satisfied with winning the case. I wanted to make sure this never happened to anyone else. So I filed a formal complaint to the county board, outlining how the HOA had attempted to enforce rules on property outside their legal boundary. I attached copies of the court documents, police report, and Karen's original cease and desist letter. The county sent me a response within 10 days. They thanked me for the information and confirmed they would be reviewing the HOA's charter and geographic authority. That might not sound like much, but for Karen, it was a storm on the horizon. And then the part that truly made it worth it, one Saturday morning, I was out fishing near the dock when Karen drove by in her golf cart, slowing down as she passed. She didn't say anything. Didn't shout. Didn't scowl. She just looked straight ahead, lips tight, sunglasses on, and kept going. She hadn't been seen shouting orders or waving HOA flyers in over a week. That silence? That was louder than anything she'd ever yelled. Later that same day, I bumped into an elderly couple named James and Ellie who lived on the hill. They'd seen the whole police incident from their porch weeks ago. James offered me a cold lemonade, then said, "You know, back in the day, folks used to solve things with conversations. Karen forgot that. But you? You reminded everyone that laws matter more than lawn signs." That stuck with me. Because this wasn't just about Karen. It was about every overreaching HOA, every petty authority figure who gets drunk on imaginary power, and every regular person who gets pushed around because they don't fit someone else's perfect little idea of who should be where. I never wanted to be the face of resistance. I just wanted my hammock, my lake, and my peace. But sometimes, standing up for something small opens the door to something much bigger. I still go to the lake every weekend. Still bring my coffee. Still lay in that hammock under the stars. But now, it feels different. It feels like I earned it. And every time I look across the water and see that big HOA clubhouse sitting quiet in the distance, I can't help but smile. Because I know they're watching. And I know they remember exactly what happened when they tried to flex control where they had none. And I'll tell you what, the next time someone like Karen calls 911 on a peaceful person just trying to exist, I hope they remember this story. Because the lake doesn't belong to her. It belongs to those who love it, not those who try to own it with rules and fear. The week after the court ruling passed in a strange silence, the kind that hangs in the air after a thunderstorm, heavy and expectant, like the world is waiting to see what comes next. Karen vanished. No HOA emails, no patrols in her golf cart, no flyers on doors about approved trash bin colors or lawn decor violations. It was like someone unplugged the power grid she ran on. But people noticed. And people talked. I started getting quiet nods and handshakes at the gas station, on the docks, even at the tiny diner 2 towns over where lake folks go for pie and gossip. One guy, old John with the canoe rental shack, stopped me and said, "You didn't just shut her up, son. You reminded the rest of us we still got a voice." And he was right. The whole lake felt different. The tension had lifted, and in its place was something softer, something freer, like the lake was breathing again. A few days later, I went down to clear some brush from the edge of the dock. I had my gloves on, loppers in hand, and was halfway through a stubborn patch of thorny vines when I heard a soft engine hum behind me. I turned to see Karen's Lexus parked right at the line between her HOA territory and my land. She didn't get out. She didn't even open the window. She just sat there, alone, engine running, watching me work. For a split second, I expected her to storm out again, waving papers, barking orders, but she didn't. She just sat there like a statue made of pride and regret. Her face was unreadable behind those oversized sunglasses, but I could feel something was different. No anger. No fire. Just stillness. She stayed there for nearly 5 minutes, then slowly backed away and disappeared down the road, tires kicking up dust that hung in the air long after she was gone. It was the last time I ever saw her near the lake. Later that night, I walked the shoreline with a flashlight in hand, just breathing in the quiet. There were no footsteps following me. No patrols. Just the crunch of leaves under my boots and the sound of the lake gently licking the rocks. I looked up at the sky, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder. I could just exist. Be still. Be home. The stars above shimmered like they had personally witnessed every piece of the drama and were now twinkling in approval. The very next morning, I found something in my mailbox that I never expected, a thick envelope with my name written on it in careful, almost nervous handwriting. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no lawyer signature, just a handwritten note. It read, "Eli. I may not agree with how you've handled everything. But I realize now I made it personal when it wasn't mine to make. Power without humility is just noise. I'm stepping back. Karen." No apology. No flowers. Just a few sentences that probably took her more effort to write than any HOA bylaw. But you know what? That note said everything it needed to. For someone like Karen, even admitting she made it personal was monumental. I folded the note and tucked it in the back of the file where I kept all the court documents. Not because I wanted to remember her, but because I wanted to remember what happens when you fight back with facts, not fists. Later that week, I drove into town to restock on fishing line and propane. At the hardware store, the clerk asked if I was the guy from the lake thing. I smiled and nodded. She grinned and said, "You're kind of a legend now. People are using your case as a reason to push back on HOA overreach all over the county." I didn't know whether to laugh or be scared. All I ever wanted was to fish in peace. But somehow I'd become a symbol, like a banner waving quietly over the lake that said, "We don't bow." A few days later, I was back in my hammock, just like the night this all started, sipping strong black coffee from a metal thermos and watching moonlight shimmer across the water. And then something strange happened. A kid, maybe 12 or 13, came creeping along the path with a fishing rod slung over one shoulder and a tackle box in his hand. He froze when he saw me. "You gonna yell at me?" he asked, voice cautious. I chuckled. "Why would I yell at you?" He looked down at his feet. "Some lady last summer said I couldn't fish here. Said only members were allowed. Do you like fishing?" I asked. He nodded. I patted the dock beside me. "Then drop your line, kid. This lake is big enough for both of us." He grinned, ran over, and started casting his line with shaky hands. We sat there for a while, watching the water, saying nothing. Just two people, connected not by rules, but by silence, stars, and the sound of distant frogs croaking in the dark. And I realized. That was the real victory. Not the court case. Not the fine. Not even the silence from Karen. It was this, the freedom to be here, to belong here, without needing anyone's approval. Karen may have tried to draw invisible lines in the dirt, but nature doesn't care about fake fences. Water flows. Trees grow. People gather. That's what communities are meant to do. And that night, under a silver moon, I finally understood the full weight of what had happened. I hadn't just kept my land, I had reclaimed the soul of the lake. And for the first time since it all began, it felt like mine again.